You know, listening to this blues music reminds me of my own trials and tribulations as a young guy, and, you know, my folks, they really dump on me.
Remember when movie studios tried to turn every film, good or bad, into a TV show? Sometimes it worked. Most of the time, though, not so much. Turning a great movie into a series is risky. Turning a bad one into a series is just reckless, but occasionally brilliant. Today we're counting down 7 shows that took weak, weird, or downright terrible movies and somehow spun them into must-watch TV. This is part 3 of our ongoing movie-to-TV adaptation series. We'll drop links to the first 2 in the description, so like and subscribe if you haven't already because it really helps us keep the nostalgia flowing. Now, let's get into the countdown with number 7, Weird Science, USA Network and Sci-Fi Channel. The original 1985 Weird Science film gave us a pair of horny teens, a magical woman they created on a computer, and some truly questionable ethics. John Hughes' teen comedy scored a middling 60-ish% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not terrible, but definitely not licensed to print money material. The movie's biggest problem was it couldn't decide if it wanted to be a teen sex comedy or a family-friendly fantasy. Anthony Michael Hall and Elon Mitchell Smith played Gary and Wyatt, 2 nerds who somehow programmed Kelly LeBrock's Lisa into existence using what looked like a Commodore 64 and some very optimistic special effects.
This is just a blueprint, okay? Now look. You like it?
Bigger tits.
And yeah, that's Robert Downey Jr. as Ian. Cool hair, bad attitude, and just enough peer pressure to launch a science experiment with zero ethical oversight. The film had its moments. Lisa was genuinely funny, but it got dragged down by all the awkward hormonal energy you'd expect from an 80s teen fantasy, and the plot made less sense than actual computer programming languages. At one point, while trying to create a Lisa clone, they accidentally summon a nuclear missile through the house. Because, of course they do. It was chaotic, awkward, and made barely any sense, but the soundtrack was a hit, and bonus points for the Oingo Boingo theme song back when Danny Elfman was still yelling plot summaries over synthesizers. That theme song cracked the Billboard Hot 100 at 45. Not bad for a song about creating your dream girl with a dial-up modem. The TV show, which ran from 1994 to 1998, had the same premise as the movie, but it was significantly less creepy. USA Network took the concept and ran with it, giving us 5 seasons of supernatural 90s sitcom gold. Vanessa Angel brought actual charisma to Lisa. She wasn't just there to grant teenage fantasies. She had opinions, boundaries, and an addiction to Chunky Monkey ice cream. Lisa could rewrite reality like it was a cheat code, transforming people, warping time, bending physics, and occasionally turning Wyatt into a human popsicle. And, like any good wish-granting wildcard, Lisa sometimes took things a little too literally. Remember when Gary wished his school classes were relevant to his interests, so Lisa turned Farber High into a party school?
A pizza class? Like, this is gonna secure my financial future.
2 words. Wolfgang Puck.
The series leaned into slapstick and sitcom tropes, but it was surprisingly self-aware, frequently mocking its own premise with Lisa rolling her eyes at the boys' ridiculous requests and teaching them life lessons through elaborate magical punishment. Michael Manasseri and John Mallory Asher stepped into the roles of Wyatt and Gary, bringing better chemistry than the original film ever managed. Lee Tergesen replaced Bill Paxton as Chet, Wyatt's military-obsessed older brother, who proved the perfect foil to the boys' sci-fi shenanigans.
Somebody's gonna die!
And here's the best part. The show was a hit. Like I said, it ran for 5 seasons and 88 episodes. Longer than Freaks and Geeks, Firefly, and My So-Called Life combined. Somewhere John Hughes was probably confused, but intrigued. Turns out, all it took was 5 seasons, a smarter Lisa, and 0 John Hughes to make Weird Science actually work. The secret was that the show understood that the best part of the premise wasn't the technology, it was the relationship between Lisa and her creators. By focusing on character dynamics instead of special effects, Weird Science, the series, managed to be both funnier and more heartfelt than its source material. Number 6. Poltergeist: The Legacy, Showtime and Sci-Fi. Let's be real, by the time Poltergeist 3 limped into theaters in 1988, the franchise was deader than Craig T. Nelson's acting career. The third film scored a brutal 15% on Rotten Tomatoes and basically killed any goodwill left from the original's "They're here" magic.
We're back.
The movie was a confused mess of mirrors, skyscrapers, and Zelda Rubinstein trying to salvage a script built entirely around mirrors and bad decisions. It was like someone took the worst parts of a supernatural thriller and mixed them with the excitement of waiting for an elevator. So, what did TV do? Well, it slapped the Poltergeist name onto a gothic supernatural drama that had almost nothing to do with the movies. No haunted TVs, no Carol Ann, no "They're here." Sorry, I legally have to do that anytime we talk about Poltergeist. Anyway, it was just pure unapologetic false advertising. Poltergeist: The Legacy gave us Derek Rain and his team of paranormal investigators. Part secret society, part supernatural SWAT team, all dramatically lit. Think The X-Files meets The Da Vinci Code, but with better candles and extra brooding in libraries. The show followed the Luna Foundation's legacy organization as they battled ancient evils, cursed artifacts, and the occasional demon possession. Derek Lint brought gravitas to Derek Rain, and the ensemble cast included future Yellow Jacket star Kristen Lehman, award-winning director Helen Shaver before she was calling the shots on Westworld, and a pre-Riverdale Martin Cummins. The show had some big-name guest stars pass through as well. Hill Street Blues legend Daniel J. Travanti showed up for 7 episodes in Season 2. And because the 90s were a strange and beautiful time, The Undertaker showed up in Season 4, playing a demon who collects souls. It was a crossover with WWE Raw that somehow made sense in a show already filled with ancient evils and dramatic candlelight. And here's the kicker. Despite being very loosely tied to a flailing franchise, the show actually worked. It ran for 87 episodes over 4 seasons, the last of which was on the Sci-Fi Channel. The show built a devoted fan base and became Showtime's flagship horror series, proving that sometimes the best adaptation is one that completely ignores its source material. The show's secret weapon was that it treated the supernatural seriously. While the Poltergeist movies descended into camp and confusion, the Legacy TV show approached each haunting, possession, or ancient curse with the weight of a prestige drama. Turns out audiences were hungry for grown-up horror that didn't involve toy clowns or ghostly real estate problems. Number 5. Alien Nation, Fox. Remember when sci-fi shows tackled real-world issues before it was cool? Yeah, Alien Nation did that, and it only needed 1 season to prove it. It all started with the 1988 movie, a buddy cop story with aliens, prejudice, and just enough social commentary to make you think this would have worked better as a TV series.
My true name is Stangya Sorens. Well, Gesundheit.
James Caan and Mandy Patinkin had solid chemistry, but the film felt like someone stretched a decent TV pilot into a 90-minute feature and forgot to add depth. Here's a fun fact for you. Patinkin's character was originally supposed to be named George Jetson, as in that George Jetson. But Hanna-Barbera pulled the plug at the last minute, so they just went with George. On set though, everyone still called him Jetson. The future was here, it just didn't fly a space car. Anyway, I digress. The movie was a moderate box office success, and reviews were mixed, but Fox stepped in 1989 and said, "We can fix it." The show took the movie's shaky allegory and turned it into a surprisingly grounded sci-fi drama about racism, immigration, and identity, decades before that became Prestige TV 101. The movie had some wild swings, like a drug called Jabroka that turned newcomers into rage-fueled mutants and a villain who literally melted in salt water. But the series didn't ditch those details, it doubled down. Jabroka reappeared in a tense episode arc, and saltwater remained a legitimate threat to Tank Tani's physiology. In one episode, a villain even bears visible saltwater burns as a reminder. It was sci-fi world-building with actual continuity, rare then and still rare now. Gary Graham took over as the grumpy human cop, while Eric Pierpoint brought surprising depth to George Francisco, a Tank Tani's detective who could have easily been a walking metaphor but wasn't. Their odd couple dynamic actually had time to grow, which made their friendship feel earned instead of scripted.
Jim. I'll see you later. Jim Turner.
He's your age.
Yeah.
He looks much younger.
What set Alien Nation apart was its attention to detail. The newcomers weren't just humans in prosthetics. They had a language, holidays, biology, and cultural tensions that felt lived in. From alien pregnancy to interspecies dating, the show tackled it all with a weirdly authentic vibe. It wasn't afraid to go there either. Episodes dealt with housing discrimination, workplace harassment, and anti-alien hate groups, all wrapped in a procedural format that still somehow felt hopeful? Too hopeful, maybe. Despite solid ratings, Fox pulled the plug after one season. But the fans didn't let it end there. Alien Nation came back as 5 made-for-TV movies throughout the 90s, a minor miracle in network TV terms. That's practically a cinematic universe by 90s standards. And let's be real, if Alien Nation had premiered on HBO in 2023, it'd be drowning in Emmys and hot takes by now, but back then, it was just another smart, strange, underrated show that proved Fox had no idea what to do with a good thing. Are you still with us? Good. Tap that like button if you remember watching any of these shows on basic cable, and drop a comment telling us which one actually deserved more love than it got. Alright, now let's get back to the countdown. Number 4, Highlander, the series, syndicated. The original 1986 Highlander film was ambitious, weird, and had Queen providing the soundtrack. But it was also a glorious mess that only managed a 69% on Rotten Tomatoes, despite being wildly entertaining. Well, according to some anyway. The movie's biggest problem was it couldn't decide if it wanted to be a serious action drama or a camp fantasy adventure.
McCloud! This is the quickening!
Christopher Lambert's Colin MacLeod delivered his lines with a brooding intensity that sometimes got lost in translation through flashbacks spanning centuries, while Sean Connery chewed scenery as an Egyptian Spanish immortal warrior who somehow had a thick Scottish accent. The film's mythology was fascinating but confusing. Immortals battling through time for the prize, whatever that was supposed to be. Then came Highlander 2, The Quickening in 1991, which scored a catastrophic 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it almost killed the franchise with its aliens from another planet retcon. Suddenly, the Immortals weren't mystical warriors. In the theatrical cut, they were refugees from a dying world called Zeist. Fans revolted, critics laughed, and the series seemed dead. But in 1992, syndicated television saw opportunity where Hollywood saw disaster. Highlander the series ignored the sequel entirely, cleaned up the mythology, and introduced Duncan MacLeod, Connor's kinsman with significantly better hair and acting ability. Christopher Lambert even appeared as Connor in the pilot episode to pass the torch. Adrian Paul's Duncan was more relatable than Lambert's Connor ever was. The series made There Can Only Be One feel like more than just a catchphrase by exploring what immortality actually means.
When I was growing up, there was a legend in my clan about a strange man in my grandfather's time who was killed in battle and then miraculously revived.
The loneliness, the burden of watching everyone you love age and die, and the weight of centuries of experience. Each episode featured sword fights, immortal philosophy, and flashbacks to different historical periods, all shot in Vancouver, pretending to be everywhere from 12th century Scotland to Revolutionary War America. The show's secret weapon was its commitment to the flashback structure, using Duncan's long life to explore different time periods and historical events. The series also improved on the film's gathering concept. Instead of all immortals inexplicably converging at once, the show spread these encounters across 6 seasons, giving each immortal opponent their own backstory and motivation. Amanda, Mythos, Richie Ryan, these characters became fan favorites in ways the film's villains never managed. And the production values? They were surprisingly solid for a syndicated show. The sword choreography was legitimately impressive, with Paul doing most of his own stunts. The historical flashbacks looked convincing even on a TV budget. Most importantly, the show took its own mythology seriously while never forgetting to have fun. Highlander ran for 6 seasons and 119 episodes. spawned multiple spin-offs including Highlander the Raven and Highlander the Source, and managed to make Highlander work as an ongoing narrative. The series proved that sometimes the best adaptation is one that learns from its source material's mistakes. Number 3. Tales from the Crypt, HBO. Tales from the Crypt was based on EC Comics horror anthology from the 1950s. Comics that were so controversial they were blamed for corrupting America's youth and essentially banned by the Comics Code Authority. They weren't exactly high art, just pulpy, gruesome, and more shocking than scary. In the 1970s, Amicus Productions adapted several EC Comics stories into British horror anthologies like Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror. Some, like The House That Dripped Blood, were well regarded, while others faded into obscurity. The 1972 Tales from the Crypt film actually earned strong reviews. It currently holds a 90% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, but it didn't make a huge cultural splash. Faithful to the comics? Yes, but more in the vein of Twilight Zone morality tales than must-see horror cinema. It took HBO's budget, vision, and twisted sense of humor to turn Tales from the Crypt into a full-blown TV classic.
Well, as long as I don't wind up on the cutting room floor.
The series took the source material's gleeful embrace of dark humor and twisted morality tales, then elevated them with A-list talent and premium cable production values. Each episode was a standalone horror story, sometimes terrifying, sometimes hilarious, always entertaining, featuring directors like Robert Zemeckis, Walter Hill, and Richard Donner. The guest star list read like a 90s People magazine cover. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Demi Moore, Joe Pesci, Whoopi Goldberg, Brad Pitt, and dozens more. But here's the real trick. Every episode played like its own mini-movie. With HBO's budget and creative freedom, Tales from the Crypt could attract major filmmakers who saw the anthology format as a chance to experiment without the pressure of a full-feature film. And then there was the Crypt Keeper, TV's creepiest host with the best puns this side of a Halloween party.
Frankly, your hack's rays look terrible. You've got to pay closer attention to your oral hygiene.
Voiced by John Kassir and brought to life through elaborate puppetry, the Crypt Keeper introduced each tale with gleeful graveyard humor, and no one delivered a death pun like this guy. The show understood that the best horror often comes with a wink and a nudge. While other horror anthologies took themselves deadly seriously, Tales from the Crypt embraced the camp and fun of the genre.
I've got a little chopping to do of my own. It's my producer's birthday. He's always wanted final cut.
The series could be genuinely scary when it wanted to be, but it never forgot that horror can also be hilariously twisted. Remember What's Cookin'? That one starred our favorite Superman, Christopher Reeve, as a down-on-his-luck diner owner whose fortunes change when a shady new busboy, played by Judd Nelson, introduces him to a secret steak recipe with unconventional ingredients. Let's just say the customers were dying to know what was in it. And then there's You Murderer, a noir-style mind-bender directed by Robert Zemeckis and narrated entirely in Humphrey Bogart's voice. The effect was pulled off using archival footage and voice work by Robert Saatchi, a Bogart impersonator so convincing it's eerie. A mobster undergoes plastic surgery to look like Bogart himself, courtesy of a doctor played by John Lithgow.
Listen, this won't do any good. You'll never understand me, but I'll try once, then give it up.
Years later, he's a successful businessman, until his wife, played by Isabella Rossellini, uncovers his dark past. What follows is a slick, shadowy spiral of betrayal, revenge, and enough plot twists to make even the Crypt Keeper dizzy. Both of these became instant classics. These standout entries showcased the show's range and proved that anthology horror could be both prestige entertainment and wildly accessible, earning praise from critics and audiences alike. Tales from the Crypt ran for 7 seasons and 93 episodes, proving that sometimes the best adaptation takes forgotten source material and gives it the respect and resources it never had. The series launched careers, won awards, and influenced a generation of horror filmmakers. The show proved that even the pulpiest source material can become prestige if you add a budget, a few buckets of blood, and a host with a killer sense of humor. Number 2, Stargate SG-1. Showtime and Sci-Fi Channel. The 1994 Stargate movie was fine. Roland Emmerich's sci-fi adventure earned a middling 53% on Rotten Tomatoes. praised for its visuals, but knocked for its clunky script and corny dialogue. It made nearly $200 million worldwide and technically launched the franchise, but let's be honest, the real breakout didn't happen until the TV series. It was a great concept with uneven execution, and yes, way too much walking through sand while Kurt Russell scowled and James Spader looked like he was trying to remember his lines in ancient Egyptian. The film's biggest problem was its scope. Emmerich came up with an incredible concept. Ancient aliens built portal technology that connects Earth to distant worlds, then trapped it in a single desert planet story that felt more Lawrence of Arabia than intergalactic adventure. It also had a classic 90s problem: big effects, barely their characters. Russell played the grumpy military guy, Spader was the awkward scientist, and together they had all the chemistry of a forced buddy movie on a deadline. Then, the show came along in 1997 and actually delivered on the movie's promise. Stargate SG-1 took that wormhole-hopping concept and turned it into a 10-season franchise that made the film look like an expensive pilot episode. Richard Dean Anderson replaced Kurt Russell as Jack O'Neill with 2 L's, if you know you know, and suddenly this stiff military commander was cracking jokes and saving the galaxy with MacGyver-level resourcefulness. Anderson brought a light touch that transformed O'Neill from a cardboard cutout into one of sci-fi TV's most beloved characters. Michael Shanks stepped into Daniel Jackson's archaeological boots and brought more charisma and depth than Spader's original performance. The team expanded with Amanda Tapping as astrophysicist Samantha Carter and Christopher Judge as the alien warrior Teal'c, forming one of the best ensemble casts in science fiction television.
This is great.
I told you.
Can't believe we didn't do this years ago.
Yes, well.
But the show's real genius was its world building. While the movie explored one alien civilization, SG-1 used the Stargate network to visit hundreds, each with their own cultures, histories, and mythologies, and it built a universe that felt expansive, coherent, and lived in. And it gave the universe stakes. The movie's Ra was fine, but SG-1 gave us the Goa'uld, the Ori, the Replicators, an entire rogues gallery built for 10 seasons of conflict. What really set SG-1 apart was its tone. The show balanced serious sci-fi with heart and humor. Episodes could pivot from galaxy-threatening crises to character-driven comedy without missing a beat. It never took itself too seriously, but it always took its characters seriously. The series ran for 10 seasons and 214 episodes, spawned 2 spin-offs, Stargate Atlantis and Stargate Universe, 2 direct-to-DVD movies, and an entire generation of fans who can pronounce Goa'uld without flinching. SG-1 proved that the best adaptations don't just copy the source material, they improve upon it. The show took a promising concept, gave it the depth and humanity the movie lacked, and turned it into a sci-fi institution. Not bad for a movie most people remember as that one with the sand and Kurt Russell's scowl. Number 1, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, WBUPN. Let's be brutally honest here. The 1992 Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie was a campy mess. Joss Whedon's original script was mangled in production, resulting in a film that scored a generous 37% on Rotten Tomatoes, despite being almost unwatchable, and we still watched it, some of us multiple times. The cast was star-studded. Kristy Swanson's Buffy was a Valley Girl stereotype with zero depth. Donald Sutherland floated through scenes like he was still cashing checks from other movies, and Luke Perry was there for reasons no one could really explain. Then there were the random appearances by big names like Pee Wee Herman, Seth Green, David Arquette, and even Ricky Lake. Yeah, they went all out. The problem was the film's tone lurched between teen comedy and horror without ever finding a consistent voice. The movie's biggest crime was wasting a genuinely brilliant concept. Whedon's idea, a teenage girl chosen to fight supernatural evil while dealing with normal high school problems, was pure genius, but the film buried it under mall movie cliches and incoherent direction. Then came the TV show in 1997, and everything changed. When Whedon got the chance to reboot his own concept for television, he didn't just improve on the original, he completely reimagined it. Sarah Michelle Gellar's Buffy became a fully realized character with depth, vulnerability, and agency. The Valley Girl dialogue became witty wordplay. The supernatural threats became metaphors for teenage struggles. The show understood what the movie missed. Buffy worked best when the monster of the week reflected whatever personal crisis she was facing. Fighting a substitute teacher possessed by a praying mantis demon while dealing with a crush on your librarian, that's not just horror, that's adolescence with fangs. Gellar brought the perfect combo of monster slaying and teenage angst to Buffy. Finally, a hero who could slay vampires and stress about her SATs. The supporting cast was pure gold. Anthony Stewart Head as Giles, the librarian mentor who made Tweed look tough. Allison Hannigan as Willow, the shy computer nerd who'd later share a toothbrush with husband Marshall on How I Met Your Mother.
That's crazy. Last week the same thing happened to our toothbrush.
Our toothbrush?
Our toothbrush.
Our toothbrush?
Yeah.
Nicholas Brendan Zander provided comic relief and unrequited crushes. Charisma Carpenter's Cordelia delivered Mean Girl zingers that could cut deeper than any steak, and Eliza Dushku as Faith, the rogue slayer who made being bad look way too good, years before she was bringing it on the big screen.
Tattoos are strictly forbidden. Sorry. I got bored during fourth period.
And then there was Angel, David Boreanaz, brooding his way through the ultimate star-crossed romance before he traded vampire drama for crime-solving on Bones.
Bones, nice shot. What?
Because nothing says complicated relationship like dating a guy who loses his soul the moment things get romantic. Thanks for that emotional trauma, Joss. But the show's real secret weapon was its writing. Whedon and his team created dialogue that was simultaneously naturalistic and heightened.
It's good too. Can I get you anything?
How about an explanation?
Funny and heartbreaking. Characters spoke in a distinctive voice that influenced television writing for decades afterward. The series also revolutionized how supernatural television handled mythology. Instead of reset button storytelling, Buffy featured long-term character arcs and consequences that carried across multiple seasons. When major characters died, they stayed dead, mostly. When relationships ended, they left emotional scars. Monsters, metaphors, teenage drama, it was the perfect combination. The show tackled everything from first loves to drug addiction to the responsibility of power, using supernatural elements to explore very human problems. The series ran for 7 seasons and 144 episodes, launched the spin-off Angel, and reshaped supernatural television forever. It influenced everything from Supernatural to The Vampire Diaries to Riverdale, proving that the best genre television uses fantastical elements to illuminate human truths. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is the ultimate example of how a terrible movie can become transcendent television. It took a failed concept and transformed it into a cultural phenomenon that's still being referenced and imitated decades later. Talk about the ultimate glow-up. So there it is, 7 shows that turned forgettable films into fan-favorite TV. Did we get it right putting Buffy at number 1, or would you crown something else? Drop your favorite in the comment section below and tell us which weird adaptation we should cover next. Hit like, tap subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next nostalgic deep dive. Until then, this is Remember When.